and February, and you've said it very clearly, to be fair, that the reforms to ILR are precipitated by the scale of recent migration to the UK. I get it, so I'm not being naive, I understand that, and you have been clear and unambiguous. But I wanted to ask you why you introduced in March this idea that without the changes, so this is another justification for dealing with ILR people, that without the changes there would be a 10 billion drain on our public finances, and you talked about the use of public services, which ironically many of these people provide in adult social care, NHS, their friends and neighbours. They don't claim benefits in the same way as other cohorts in the UK. So what I wanted to ask is that a good way of talking about these people when the figures that you rely on yourself, the MAC figures, indicate a net positive economic contribution for at least the next 20 years? The kinds of figures you're talking about, again, to be slightly helpful, pensions and so on, are not going to be affected by these delays. These are working age benefits, working people who are not claiming benefits on the whole. So going forward to the consultation, will you remove that idea and stick to the numbers, I guess? But they are anxious, and what would be your response to that?
Well, look, firstly, I think indefinite leave to remain is a lifelong benefit. It isn't a short-term benefit or a status that you receive for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or until you become a pensioner. It is a lifelong benefit. In the sense that once you receive indefinite leave to remain, you may permanently remain in the country for the rest of your life. Whether you choose then to become a citizen or not is a personal matter, and people make their own choices on that. I don't think it's unreasonable to look at a lifetime cost of a status that is conferred for a lifetime. So I would just challenge that underlying assumption there. And I think on this debate, I think, look, it's contested and there will always be strong views, but I tend to think on these things it's better to stick to the numbers and the facts. So as I say, this is a lifelong status, not a temporary one, and therefore looking at lifetime cost, I think, is perfectly reasonable. I also think that given what we have seen over the last few years, this is a pattern of migration into the country that we have never seen ever before in our history. There is no other comparable number or type of migration that has occurred here. When people like my granddad came to the country, net migration was bumbling along at something like 50 or 60,000 a year. And in the last few years, the numbers have approached, almost 1 million. This is a scale of change we've never seen before. The other thing that I think is unique to this cohort that does demand a public policy consideration is, we've also never dropped skills requirements in quite this way with this sort of number ever before. So it had been the case before the so-called Boris wave that the skills requirements were RQF grade 6 and above, which is a sort of proxy for skilled workers. That was dropped to below RQF level 6, and that is also accounts for a very large number of not just visa holders that have arrived from different parts of the world, but also the very large number of dependents that have arrived as well. And what I would say is, look, when you're in a position where you know that the policy environment was unlike anything we've seen before, the skills requirements of people were unlike anything that we've seen before, and at those numbers that we've not seen before, and when you know that 1 in 30 people presently today in the UK arrived in the last 4 years, that does demand some public policy consideration at the very least. I mean, if you care as much about integration as I do, there is a question there about numbers and the ability to integrate such very large numbers as well, and I think those are important questions to interrogate. So it's perfectly fair for people who have a different view to say, I don't think you should change anything, who have a different view to say, I don't think you should change anything here. And that is a position that I think is, it's fair and legitimate, and this is a contested debate and people are entitled to take their positions on it. But you do have to also accept that as a matter of public policy, there will be costs and consequences to the do-nothing environment as much as there would be to the environment in which you say we're going to have to take some action as well. So what I don't think is possible is to just pretend that this massive change hasn't happened. I also don't think it's possible to just say, well, it happened under the previous government, let's just write it off, it's history, let's move on.